data is the new currency, and getting your data right and getting your data sorted, even though it's not the sexiest job, it is the bedrock for all success, especially from an AI perspective. And my personal aspiration is that people are going to use that time to connect with other people better and the human touch.
I'd like to welcome Kyle Mai, the SVP and Chief Innovation Officer at Esquire Bank, here next with me. Kyle, thanks so much for coming in. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Terry. It's a pleasure to be here.
Kyle, I know I see you on LinkedIn getting awards and soaking it all in. I'm kidding, but congratulations on all the success you've had and the growth of the business. I know Esquire's done phenomenally well. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you're doing, what your responsibilities are at the bank, and just introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer at Esquire Bank, which is a bit of a funky title, but what that means is I look after all revenue generating technology and processes at the bank, so top of funnel sales and marketing technology. And in addition to that, I also run the marketing function at Esquire Bank. In fact, I've had to build it from scratch, which is something similar to what a lot of law firms have had to do, and I'm sure we'll get into that in a bit.
Yeah. You don't necessarily, marketing and marketing tech doesn't necessarily jump to the top of your head when you're thinking about banks or law firms, frankly. So I understand why you're saying you had to build it, but just a quick retrospective, what did that look like, kind of taking it from 0 to maybe 100 where you are now?
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey. Firstly, it's been a multi-year journey, right? When you're starting off with nothing, you're trying to figure out what does your marketing department need to look like? What kind of processes need to be in place in order for you to do your marketing effectively? And what kind of marketing do you actually want to do? Is it B2B focused or is it B2C focused? Once you figure out more of those business related aspects, then you're talking about MarTech, software, email, how are you going to get your messages out? What channels are you going to use? And what's the most effective way to measure what you're actually doing is actually working?
An interesting thing about Esquire is that you're funding firms to help them grow. And I'm sure in your world, you have to understand both the growth plans for Esquire as well as the growth plans for your customers because you're marketing to them. I'd love to understand the similarities, the differences, how you think about that. What does that process look like?
Yeah, one of the benefits I have having a role akin to a CMO at Esquire Bank is I get to talk to some of our most successful customers. And what we see time and time again is when they get financing and capital from Esquire Bank, they're investing heavily in marketing. And you typically see a couple of law firms do a few things. There are some law firms that just stick to the formula, and we're talking about personal injury law firms here. Billboards, put as many billboards as possible up on the interstate and the highways. Let's advertise on television late night. Let's pump some money into radio. That's very traditional, tried and tested approaches for mass marketing that personal injury law firms have been employing for many, many years. It's expensive though. Not everyone can do that. And you're basically hoping that off the back of one of your advertising campaigns, the phone is going to start ringing. There are smarter ways in which law firms are doing things like direct one-to-one contact using social media channels and driving people digitally into their law firm websites and intake forms.
When you think about where best to focus as it relates to technology, what are the things that immediately come to mind in both your role in servicing the bank as well as servicing those clients?
Yeah, when I reflect on that question, what's interesting is how similar the bank's focus on technology is to a law firm. And I'm just going to use some generic examples. What we focused on very heavily from a technology perspective were the foundations, the belt and braces. Let's get your data sorted. Let's ensure that your security, data, and your infrastructure is good enough to be able to service different departments and different functions. From that core, and in a law firm's case, you might be talking about case management systems and financial payment systems as well. Knowing that that's sorted then allows you to move off to other departments and other processes which add more value, like revenue generating department, software and technology, sales department, marketing department, sales and technology. So once you've got that core in place, moving up the funnel to exponentially increase your firm's revenue generation capabilities makes a lot of sense.
So the plumbing needs to be in place first, and then it's about adding the different rooms and other bathrooms and things like that in order to really drive it.
100%.
Got it. You mentioned data a few times, and I'm curious what you're seeing in terms of how are firms leveraging data? How are they using it to either reinvest in the business? But how is data being viewed now differently maybe than it was 5 years ago?
It's interesting to bring that up. In the new world of AI, data is the new currency. And getting your data right and getting your data sorted, even though it's not the sexiest job and no one really likes to do it, it is the bedrock for all success, especially from an AI perspective. It's always been really important, and it's always been something that's played second fiddle. But personally, I hope that when people realize that without that bedrock of data, your AI solutions aren't going to be that good in the future.
When you're looking at a firm's data and trying to assess, how you're going to loan, what those terms look like, value, things like that, what bubbles to the top in terms of the important points on data?
Yeah, so there are so many different data points that we collect from our customers when they apply for a loan. So things like their previous financial history, their company accounts, tax returns, and then you've got the cases that they're working on far into the future, next 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and sometimes even 5 years. The point here is there's a huge amount of data points that get collected at different points in time, all of which affect different variables from a lending perspective and how we actually view our clients. And the most important thing there is getting it right, and getting it at the right time.
Kyle, you mentioned AI and the advent of these different service providers and how firms are leveraging it. I'm curious on two fronts. One, from the bank's perspective, how are you all leveraging AI in your day-to-day? And then also, when you're looking at the firms you're lending with, how do you see them either being afraid of it, embracing it, having the same problems? So it's the same question. I'm just curious from those two perspectives, how you're looking at it.
At Esquire Bank, we approach AI with cautious optimism. We know how much benefit it can potentially have to the organization once we're comfortable with ethically whether we're using it appropriately or even from a security standpoint. Being a bank, you could imagine that security is our top technology priority. So putting the right things in place to support such a great new technology was important to us. So we would have to do things like set up an AI policy, ensure that got ratified by the board. We have an AI governance committee that's there to understand the nuances of the technology and help with the transition. As part of our AI approach, we've decided to pilot it purely in a couple of test use cases within the marketing department that we felt were safe, that was low in risk. Because at the end of the day, what's interesting with marketing is there's always a human in the loop when it comes to marketing. So having AI help you generate content, a human's going to be looking at that content and reviewing that. So marketing felt like the safest place for us to start.
Mm-hmm. And on the firm side?
Yeah, so when it comes to law firms, personally, I'm super excited to see what you're doing and what's going to happen in the legal tech world, because let's talk about generative AI. Generative AI is all about text and word synthesization. And if you think about what a law firm does day in and day out, it's all about text synthesization. Yeah, exactly. So there are so many efficiencies that can be gained from reading text more appropriately, summarizing text more appropriately, sending text more appropriately. And the legal industry is rife for change, and it's going to be so interesting to see what happens.
You mentioned AI sort of looking at these language models, just understanding text and what conceivably should come next. But is there a danger of losing that human touch, both at the bank and at these firms, in your view?
I actually view AI as an opportunity to increase human touch and connection, actually. It's not necessarily binary, because when you start using AI and you find yourself shaving 5 minutes off this task or 10 minutes off this task that previously used to take you a long time to do, what you do to fill that space is what's important. And what you do is you pick up the phone and you talk to someone because you have more time to have a discussion. You spend more time connecting with people. So yes, there are going to be certain instances where you could use AI to totally replace human connection, but you'll fill it up with other things.
That should be the right things. It's like squeezing a balloon, perhaps. You don't want to. The air's going to go somewhere else. I love that concept, and I think that you read a lot about it. It's not what AI is; it's what it can do or what it will do for you. So I think leveraging, in the right way to create these opportunities for more human touch is the right way to think about it, which is exactly what you said. That's great.
Yeah, exactly. And ultimately, what opportunity does AI give you? It's time. There's no other tool out there that's come out that can drastically save as much time as AI does.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do with that time is the biggest question. How do you use that most effectively? And my personal aspiration is that people are going to use that time to connect with other people better and the human touch.
In thinking about security and AI, you said human in the loop, which that term has become ubiquitous in this space. How important it is for you to, first off, at the bank to make sure that there is some type of confirmation or affirmation process with anything AI might create, and then are you seeing the same thing on the firm side?
From a banking perspective, the reason why we've deliberately started with marketing use cases was we're not quite sure whether the technology is mature enough just yet to make automated underwriting decisions, for example.
Right.
Because of the sheer quantity of different kind of documentation that we're collecting and how that could potentially be interpreted. Would we use it to expedite the process to create a document a lot quicker than we normally would? Absolutely. But from an automated, no human in the loop perspective, not quite there yet. Some use cases, absolutely we're there yet, especially around marketing and deciding what next best content a person should be seeing. We're already using that without a human in the loop now. From a law firm side, I could imagine it's scary. If you're a lawyer and you struggle with technology already and you're faced with the prospect of implementing technology but you're not sure about security, or you're not quite sure how it works and the results are always slightly different depending upon who's using it, that's uncertainty. So lawyers and law firms might struggle with that quite a lot.
As part of Esquire's services, not only are you lending capital for them, but I imagine there's some best practices and guidance that you can give them in terms of where that capital should be invested. When you see a firm come in and ask, let me back that up. I'm going to ask the whole question again.
Sure.
So when Esquire works with a client, I mean, not only are you providing capital, I'm sure there's best practices and guidance you can provide to them as well as to what to do with the capital. What are you recommending nowadays? Because there's so many options for lawyers to improve on their operations or technology, but what are the things that are really the highlights in terms of you see as guidance?
We like to think that when we gain a new customer, that customer joins a network, because we've got so many customers that are all looking to grow. We're often asked to provide recommendations for case management systems and who we see some of the most successful law firms are using. The common thing across a lot of these law firms is they're struggling with the top of funnel activities, ensuring they have a consistent flow of cases coming through. They're fantastic at the bottom end, getting the verdicts and settlements, but that top of funnel challenge they have around intake and marketing keeps coming back over and over again.
I like that, by the way. Good one. Kyle, you and I share something in common, that we have a bit of a Salesforce background and that ecosystem in our past. And I always say that Salesforce is an amazing marketing company that happens to have great technology along with it. So I'd love your thoughts on how you're seeing things like Agentforce and the new versions of the Salesforce products that are coming to be. How is that playing out in your world? How's it playing out in the broader legal landscape?
All of the technology vendors in the last 2 years have come out with an AI solution. Some of them are really simple bolt-ons to what they already have, which are wrappers to ChatGPT. And others like Salesforce have built fully fledged enterprise solutions with security frameworks in place, which is quite interesting to us, because from a bank perspective and probably from a law firm perspective as well, you might want to look at a solution that has an entire security, privacy kind of module that comes with it, so that it's one less thing you need to worry about, And from the perspective of the functionalities, a lot of them, from a generic perspective, are pound for pound around about the same thing. It just matters who's using it, whether you're adding some context and data to it as well, which is Salesforce's shtick, because Agentforce allows you to access all of the rich data within the CRM system in order to generate the results. And at the end of the day, that's kind of what you want from your AI solutions, to have context from somewhere else in order to generate the results that's more valuable and meaningful for your users.
In keeping with that theme of it's not the AI, it's what you do with it, what we're finding is that the sort of domain expertise and understanding, in our case, how law firms are going to leverage AI to grow and to use your investment in the right way. And for me at Lexafide, it's about leveraging our technology to make things go faster, make things more accurate, make things some of the quote unquote kind of grunt work that can be automated, all to the same end, in making clients happier, making employees more effective, kind of making the entire business more productive. So that was more of a statement than a question, but I just wanted to, just to highlight the idea around we're all facing the same sort of challenges. It's really just a matter of, can you get an understanding of the space, of what the objectives are, and then the nuance of how folks in that world are using it appropriately. So I'm sure you're seeing the same thing.
Yeah, and what you're referring to there is vertical specialization. That's critical, right? Like, what differentiates just off-the-shelf ChatGPT to a vertically specialized solution? The difference is you guys understand the processes, you understand the challenges, you've addressed those before. So it's definitely going to provide better results, more consistent results than just using an off-the-shelf kind of LLM solution.
So Kyle, when you were working with firms and you're thinking about or helping them think about the campaigns they're looking to roll out, how are you assessing that data, and how are you kind of really understanding the performance of the capital related to leads, related to performance and case results? Like, what does that process look like for you guys?
What's interesting that we see across a lot of law firms is there's a lot of law firms that will just dump a lot of money into campaigns and then hope that something comes back.
Hope is never a great strategy.
Yeah, exactly. But they're so used to doing that, it often becomes a crutch, right? And they don't know there's a way to approach marketing that involves statistics, data, analytics, and analyzing how much you're getting from different channels and what's pulling through to your funnel and what's coming through to your intake system. Sometimes they consider that very difficult and hard to do, but it's not actually that hard if you know what to track and when to track it and what's most important to pull through to your lawyers in the intake system.
I'm curious, when you like look at a firm, can you tell from those initial responses or initial way that they look at data and the way that they're looking at their intake process, are they a good candidate for growth? I'm curious, like, how you're making those assessments in your mind and how you help them, frankly, when they're asking you questions along these lines.
What's interesting, when we use the vernacular or terminology intake, you can replace that with a prospect or an opportunity. And we know this from the Salesforce world, or lead. And ultimately, whether it's a law firm, whether it's a bank or any organization out there, there is a process. There are stages that someone goes through, from not really that interested to, yeah, they look like they're going to sign a deal.
Yeah.
This life cycle is common across all the industries that I've worked for and in law firms. And really understanding that process, documenting and having those hard life cycle stages, and understanding what dictates movement throughout those stages, and this from the Salesforce days, is the work. The technology then layers in over that.
Right.
But once you've done those foundational process mapping, data mapping, all the unsexy stuff,
Yeah.
the rest becomes easy, and you know exactly what to track and how to track it and when to track it.
Kyle, in today's environment, it does feel like the sand is shifting, and there's different options and different providers and different technology that's available to firms and banks. How do you identify sort of what are the consistent, bedrock elements versus these maybe sort of side things that are maybe important, maybe not, but like how do you make those assessments?
That's a great question, and you're right. The noise and the clutter is deafening, right? If you look in your inbox and you go to that spam portion, you've probably got hundreds of emails from people trying to sell you some newfangled AI solution.
Right.
And it's difficult for senior managers as well, and trying to prioritize and figure out what works and what doesn't. My advice is, what's going to make you the money? So start with intake processes, marketing processes, sales processes. If you're going to go down the path of artificial intelligence and implementing the new technology, what your board, what your executive and management team want to hear isn't necessarily, we're going to implement this AI solution because we're going to save money and replace people's jobs. No, it can be, we're going to implement these AI solutions because we're going to generate some serious revenue from this. So approaching things from a revenue generation perspective versus a cost savings perspective makes a lot of sense. Or approaching things from you're going to get your data sorted out off the back of this implementation perspective makes a lot of sense from a long-term foundational technology and data build perspective, because you're not going to lose in the long run if you implement solutions that not only increase your revenue generation capabilities, but collects unique data points that only your organization has. Because like I said before, data is the new currency.
When you're at these conferences, what are you seeing in terms of on stage, off stage, interacting with clients, other legal tech vendors? What's your observations?
It's interesting. At every single conference you go to, everyone's talking about AI. You see technology vendors standing on stage giving amazing presentations and demonstrations about what it can do. And then you talk to your colleagues and your peers in the crowd and you realize they're not ready for the transformation and change. I believe that over the years, the gap and distance between what technology vendors are offering versus what clients are actually ready to implement is going to close over time.
We talk a lot about AI and we've heard the term agents and what they do. What's interesting in my world is how there's more complexity that's being offered here, where it's not just, a ChatGPT prompt giving you a better way to say something. It's complex tasks, and if then multiple, where you give an agent a mission, an ultimate end goal that you want to get to, and it understands the steps that's required to go from point A to point L, for example. What are you seeing in that regard? Are you hearing a lot of talk about agents and such?
Good that you mentioned this topic, just to frame who I am so you understand the level of geek that's sitting in front of you. When agents first came out with custom GPTs and ChatGPT, I started building my own for fun.
Wow, that's geeky.
Yeah, I know. And I've got multiple agents on my phone, so I totally believe in what agents can do and have the experience with actually building them myself as well. And in the enterprise world, it's going to be so interesting to see what happens. I truly believe that over the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to walk into work and you're going to be interacting with an agent that then helps you decide which other agents to interact with to perform whatever task you're wanting to do. People are going to have hundreds or thousands of different agents that they could potentially work on or work with in order to perform their jobs. And each agent will likely perform one thing really well, like you mentioned, and then move data off to another agent, which then works down the value chain in order to complete an actual process itself. So it's going to be so interesting to see what work looks like when your primary interaction at work is with agents.
Kyle, in your day to day and your experimentation with technology, AI, what are you seeing as a result of all this? Like, what does it actually provide for you?
Lots of people focus on results and they're curious about how much money you've saved or how much money you're making. But actually, the thing that we're getting back the most is time. When you shave 5 minutes off this task, 10 minutes off another task, when you add that all up, you can end up with hours back in your day. The question that remains once you give your employees and your staff members back time is, what are they going to do with it? As senior leaders, you want to incentivize not the fact that the time was saved, but what happens in the space that gets created.
Are you seeing organizations almost build KPIs around that? Meaning, if there's a way to optimize for, we're saving time and making these tasks more expeditious. As a result, we're increasing our activities over here. So building incentive, you mentioned incentives, like to do those types of things. Like, how are companies looking at it that way? Are they starting to embrace that type of philosophy?
I think it's still early days and companies have not yet realized that they need to incentivize what happens in that space, because that's what brings value. That's what makes people feel good.
Yeah.
If all you're doing is expecting them to write more emails or do more spreadsheets, that's not going to feel great. But if you, in that space, allow them to do things that improve their lives and their company and the company's well-being, that's a definitely great thing that companies should be doing.
Kyle, when folks embrace technology, they think about ROI. What is the ROI that's realized with AI or new tech, and what are firms actually doing with it?
Yeah, and I'm going to extrapolate this up to the bank and just generically in humanities. So in the marketing department, once we started to implement AI and we saw time savings, what we saw was that staff members used that time to do things they loved and the reason why they moved into marketing. So to be more creative, to spend more time thinking about the brief that they need to write, all the things they loved doing and brought them into marketing was what they ended up working on and spending their time on. Because marketers typically run around with their hair on fire doing things that are not creative, that are not fun. So when they started to save that time, that allowed them to do those things. From a legal standpoint, I would imagine that there's a reason why lawyers got into the practice of law. And it wasn't the administrative annoying things that they need to do on a daily basis. Well, that's taking up all of their time.
Let's go back to the younger Kyle 10, 15 years ago and related to maybe someone starting out in the industry today. What should they focus on? What should they learn about? What should someone really try to get an experience around in order to build their career?
Yeah, if I was starting my career now, it's so hard to know which direction to go these days, especially with AI and what jobs are still going to be there and how jobs are going to morph and things like that. If I were starting off my career today, I would focus a lot less on technical capabilities and I'd actually focus on the more human skills that make me unique. So things like presentation skills, how to run meetings, workshops, process mapping, the kind of things that AI are going to find difficult to kind of replicate. Sales, fantastic job, will be there forever, building relationships with people. That's definitely the direction I would go for safety and certainty.
We've heard a lot about AI. We're all hearing a lot about AI every day. What other trends are you seeing in the industry? What other things are kind of coming to your purview, either in marketing technology, legal technology, or just general sort of process improvements and things like that? Are there things you're seeing consistently?
Yeah, the common trend is everyone's suddenly talking about data, which is important because they're starting to realize that without a solid bedrock of unique data to your organization that's contextual to how it operates, AI is just AI, something off the shelf that's no different to something else someone else has. But when you combine that with specialized data that's unique to your organization, that's well maintained, that's where the magic happens.
When we were thinking about the business plan for Lexafide and how we're going to go to market, we were really trying to assess what is going to be impactful. And there's many competitors out there that are working on content extraction, term extraction, drafting, some of the more, I'll call them sexier elements in the case life cycle, trial prep, things like that. And our focus kind of came squarely on the intake side of it, mostly because we were thinking about businesses like Esquire. And if you were looking at where to invest, you would want to make sure that the firm you're investing with and that your loan was secured, because that company is using that money in the right way and starting the engine, so to speak, in the right way. So I'm curious, when you guys are thinking about firms to lend with, how much does that play into factor? Like how much is how sound their process, their technology, those types of things are? Does that make them a good candidate for Esquire services?
So it's interesting what you mentioned there, and what we notice a lot is mindset. And what I mean by that is lots of lawyers are ready to spend millions of dollars to be on TV and billboards and all that kind of stuff. And very few of them are talking about the nitty-gritty of what happens when someone actually picks up the phone and is going to talk to a law firm. That's more important than what shows up on a billboard, because you already have them on the hook. So lawyers that focus on that end of the market and that end of the funnel makes a lot of sense to us, because they understand that when you convert at that level, that's where the gold happens.
Kyle, thanks so much for coming in today. I found your insights incredibly helpful. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I look forward to a continued partnership with you and Esquire.
Thank you very much, Terry. It's always a pleasure and a great conversation.
Thanks.